This is the Forgotten Crypt, but most players know it by its unofficial name, the Karazhan Crypt. It's a closed-off area that's been in the game since the very beginning, where players have theorized that the crypt was kept out of the game because the scenery was simply too graphic for the player base. And after an apparent leak, there's evidence suggesting that the area might finally be opened to players. In this video, we will take a closer look at both the crypt as well as the rumors surrounding it. This is the story of the Karazhan Crypt. While the Karazhan Crypt is most well known as being the place that was simply too scary for the world of Azeroth, this isn't actually the case, and in order to understand why the Karazhan Crypt was closed off, we instead need to go all the way back to World of Warcraft release in 2004. When the first players logged into the world of Azeroth, they were met by starting zones that were generally fully developed, both in terms of leveling and their stories. And this is because Blizzard mainly focused on finishing the quest and storylines of the low-level zones, knowing that it would take at least a couple of months for most players to reach the higher levels. As a result of this, the first players who made it to the higher levels experienced zones that weren't completed in their entirety, with especially Silithus and Western Plaguelands lacking a lot of content. While the other zones were eventually fixed over the next few patches. One of them, the Deadwind Pass, a zone located between Duskwood and the Swamp of Sorrows, never had as much as a single quest. And throughout the entire zone, there were only 12 different NPCs. Meaning that realistically, the zone didn't serve any purpose apart from being the pathway between its two neighboring zones. Some players still visited the zone, as the NPC, called Sky Shadow, dropped a lot of loot, which made them decent for farming at the time. The few players who ventured deeper into the zone would find the Tower of Medivh, called Karazhan, and hidden behind it in an area called Morgan's Blood was the entrance to a crypt which was locked behind a gate. Due to its secluded location, it took a while before players found out about the crypt, but towards the later patches of Vanilla in 2006, players started posting pictures and videos of the area, which was easily accessible as all players had to do was die near the gate and then resurrect on the other side of the gate. Once inside, players would find themselves in an area called Pauper's Walk, which led down to the main area simply called Crypt, which had some gates that players could open. These had the seemingly unusual name of Doodad_Wrought Iron Door followed by a number, which actually isn't that unique in itself, as many doors and gates within the game have a similar description. But unlike other doors and gates, whose real object names can only be seen by game masters, these could be seen and opened by player characters. From the main hall, it was possible to access a number of rooms, with one in particular, the Upside Down Sinners, being out of the ordinary. This small part of the crypt was so graphic that players theorized it to be the reason Blizzard ended up cutting the Karazhan Crypt from development. Over the years, this theory was repeated so often that it pretty much became a fact according to the player base. But in a forum discussion about the crypt in 2014, a Blizzard community manager explained that this was unlikely to be the case, referring to the development process of making a lot of content and then later deciding what to use. Some years later, during the Legion expansion, a phased version of the area was finally made available, but only to players who were on the last stage of a long and very difficult riddle called Riddle of the Lucid Nightmare, and in 2018, the intention behind the zone was finally revealed to the player base, and former Blizzard developer Jonathan Stats was asked about the crypt in a Reddit Q&A, where he explained that it was intended to be an area for questing, but that development was cancelled due to no longer being needed. This makes sense, as once the zones of Eastern Plaguelands, Western Plaguelands and Silithus were finally made complete, there were already an abundance of content made available for high-level players. Recently, player interest in the Karazhan Crypt has reappeared with the Season of Discovery, a version of the game that's based on the original vanilla, but with the addition of some of the content that was never available in the original game. During an announcement, Blizzard made a quote-unquote accidental reveal of some of the content that they had been working on, and here, BlizzCon attendees got to see 3 images, one of them being an Alarmobot, which is an NPC that can be found in a Gnomeregan dungeon, an image taken outside the Scarlet Monastery, and lastly, an image of a dark pathway where the location name Pauper's Walk can be seen. Since then, Gnomeregan has been data mined and confirmed to be remade in the second phase of the season, and some players, as well as WoW content creators, have theorized that the Karazhan Crypt will be opened in the third phase of the season. While this could absolutely be the case, I would expect it to be released later during Phase 4 instead, as in Phase 3 the level cap will be set to 50, while the NPCs found near the crypt are all between level 58 and 60. While the completion of the Karazhan Crypt is quite likely at this point, there is still the question of what kind of content it will hold, with a lot of players expecting to see a dungeon or raid, which is probably going to be the case, but in light of the answer that John Stat gave in his Q&A, it is possible that the area will instead be used for questing as it was originally intended. But for now, this is still for time to decide. I hope you enjoyed the video and that you learned something new. And if you'd like to learn more about high-level content that ended up being cut from vanilla, feel free to click either of the two videos shown on the screen. And thank you for watching.